It was supposed to be my birthday, my night. But from the moment I walked into that restaurant, I could already tell it wasn't about me anymore. The place was packed with friends, co-workers, and a few faces I hadn't seen in years. My wife, Lily, had gone all out with the decorations. She greeted me with a kiss that barely brushed my cheek, polite, practiced, and then drifted right back to her conversation with Ryan. Ryan, the man she said was just a friend from work. I didn't make a scene. I never do. Instead, I smiled and nodded my way through the crowd, shaking hands, thanking people for coming, pretending not to notice the way Lily and Ryan kept exchanging glances across the table. He had that smug confidence, the kind that comes from thinking you're in on a secret. I'd seen that look before, and the way she laughed at his jokes, too easily, too freely. The kind of laugh she hadn't given me in months. But I wasn't here to play detective. Not tonight. I'd already suspected enough, seen enough late-night texts and unexplained absences to know what was going on. What mattered tonight was how I handled it. When the waitress brought out the cake, everyone gathered around, clapping and cheering. "Make a wish," someone shouted. I looked around the room, faces lit by candlelight, and for a second I felt oddly calm. I didn't make a wish. I just smiled. Then, right before I blew out the candles, Ryan leaned over to Lily and whispered something. She tried to hold back a laugh, but failed miserably. The two of them burst out giggling, right there, in front of everyone. A few people glanced at me, unsure of what they were seeing. I didn't ask what the joke was. I didn't have to. I already knew who the punchline was. Still smiling, I took the knife, sliced the first piece of cake, and handed it straight to Ryan. "For the man who makes my wife laugh more than I do," I said evenly. The room went silent for half a second, the kind of silence that lands heavy and sharp. Then I lifted my glass. "To love," I said, locking eyes with Lily. "And to loyalty, the rarest gifts of all." Some people chuckled nervously. Others just stared. Lily's smile faltered for the first time that night. Ryan looked like he didn't know whether to laugh or hide under the table. I finished my drink, set it down gently, and excused myself to the restroom. When I came back, the party had picked up again. But something had shifted. The laughter didn't sound the same anymore. I didn't confront anyone that night. Didn't accuse. Didn't demand explanations. I just stood quietly in the corner, watching the two of them dance, her hand on his shoulder, his hand resting a little too low on her back. That was the moment I decided. If they wanted to make a fool of me in public, fine. I'd let them finish their show. Because the next one, the real performance, would be mine. And it wouldn't end with applause. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was angry. Anger's easy. It burns quick and leaves nothing behind. What I felt was colder than that, heavier. It sat in my chest like a quiet decision that had already been made. Lily came home around midnight. She smelled like wine and perfume, not hers. When she saw me sitting on the couch, still dressed, she hesitated. "You're still up?" she asked. "Couldn't sleep," I said. My voice didn't rise, didn't tremble. Just calm. Controlled. She fumbled for excuses, said something about dropping Ryan off, that everyone insisted she stay for one last drink. Her tone was casual, too casual. The kind people use when they've already rehearsed their lie. I nodded, pretending to believe her. "Sounds fun," I said. "Did you have a good time?" She smiled, relieved, and went upstairs. That's when I knew she thought she'd gotten away with it. And maybe, in that moment, she had. The next morning, I made her coffee like I always did. No questions, no hints. I acted like everything was normal. Because that's how you win. Not by reacting, but by observing. I spent the next few days watching. Quietly. She was careless now. Too confident. Late-night texts she tried to hide. A sudden new password on her phone. Calls taken in the bathroom with the water running. She even started humming again. She only ever hummed when she was happy. I wondered if she realized how much her small habits betrayed her. By the fourth day, I already knew where she was going after work. The lie was always the same, team drinks or late meeting. But her location tag told another story. A little bar near the river, the same spot Ryan liked to post pictures from. I didn't confront her. Instead, I started gathering proof. Screenshots. Call logs. I wasn't doing it for revenge. I was doing it to reclaim control, to make sure that when the truth came out, it wouldn't be her word against mine. On the fifth night, she came home laughing again. I could hear her on the phone from the driveway before she even opened the door. When she saw me, she quickly hung up. I didn't say anything, just smiled and asked, "Everything okay?" She said, "Of course," and kissed my cheek, the same hollow gesture as always. That night, I stood in front of the mirror for a long time. My reflection looked calm, maybe even detached, but my mind was racing. Every move, every word from here on had to count. She'd humiliated me once. That was enough. The next morning, I sent a message to an old friend who worked in cybersecurity. "Need a favor," I wrote. "Quiet one." He replied with just 2 words. "Say when." The game had started. I met my friend Mark 2 days later at a quiet cafe downtown. He'd always been the type who noticed everything but said little. The kind of man you call when you need something done discreetly. I told him just enough to make him understand. "She's seeing someone," I said simply. "I don't want drama. I just want the truth. Clean, undeniable." He nodded. "You want eyes or data?" "Both," I said. "I need proof that even her conscience can't talk around." Mark didn't ask more. He never did. He handed me a small flash drive and said, "Install this on her laptop. It'll sync her emails and messages to a private folder. I'll handle the rest." I took it, slipped it into my pocket, and finished my coffee. My pulse didn't rise once. When betrayal becomes obvious enough, emotion burns out. What's left is precision. That night, Lily said she had a networking dinner. She even put on the perfume she used to wear when she wanted me to notice her. Now it just smelled like pretense. As soon as she left, I went into her office. I'd helped her set up that laptop, knew her passwords by memory. I inserted the drive and waited. 2 minutes later, the screen blinked, data transferring quietly. When it was done, I removed the drive, wiped the traces, and left everything exactly as it was. The next morning, I had access. Her emails, messages, everything. And what I found was worse than I expected. They weren't just talking. They were mocking me, my routines, my job, even my kindness. Ryan had written, "He's too calm to notice anything." And she replied, "That's what makes it fun." I read every line in silence. No shaking hands. No anger. Just a deep, sharp focus. Every insult, every laugh at my expense became fuel. I saved copies, encrypted them, and stored them on a separate drive. By the end of the week, Mark sent me photos. Ryan and Lily at a hotel parking lot. The same pattern, same time, every Friday. They weren't careful because they thought I was blind. That Friday, instead of waiting at home, I drove to that hotel and parked across the street. Through the windshield, I watched them walk out, holding hands. They looked happy, and oddly, that was the moment I stopped hurting. You can't lose something that already left you long ago. I didn't follow them, didn't take pictures. I just started the car and drove off. I had what I needed. That night, I printed out the photos and transcripts, sealed them neatly in an envelope, and wrote on the front, "Truth, for Lily and Ryan." I placed it in my desk drawer, not to use yet. Timing is everything. Because the next time they laughed in public, it wouldn't be at me. It would be the last time they laughed at all. I spent the next week living like nothing had changed. Every morning, I brewed Lily's coffee, kissed her forehead before work, asked about her day. I even laughed at her stories. The trick to pulling off calmness is to make it real, at least on the surface. Inside, though, I was watching everything. Every word, every movement, every misplaced smile. Ryan called her often. I could tell by the way her tone shifted whenever she saw his name light up her screen. She'd lower her voice, walk to another room, pretend to check the stove or fold laundry that didn't need folding. It almost became funny how predictable she was. One evening, she came home humming again. She dropped her bag, kissed my cheek, and said, "Guess what? Ryan's company just got the city project. It's a huge deal. He might be promoted soon." I smiled. "That's great news," I said. "You must be proud." She froze for half a second. Maybe she heard something in my tone, but then brushed it off. "Yeah, I'm just happy for him. He's worked hard." "I'm sure he has," I replied. That was the night I realized my plan wouldn't just be about personal revenge. Ryan wasn't just her lover. He was her supervisor. Married, too, with a reputation in the firm for being ethical and leadership material. The irony of it almost made me laugh. Mark and I talked again the next morning. I told him to dig deeper. Their work emails, meeting schedules, expense reports. If their affair leaked through any company channel, it could end both their careers. He grinned. "So, you're going all in." "I'm just giving them the stage they asked for," I said. "They wanted an audience. I'll make sure they have one." For the next few days, I kept the act going. Dinners, small talk, even a surprise lunch at her office. She looked startled when I walked in, like a thief caught mid-act. Ryan was there too, standing a little too close behind her desk. "Didn't expect you," she said, voice shaky. "I thought I'd bring lunch to my favorite person," I replied calmly. Didn't mean to interrupt. Ryan tried to laugh it off, offering a handshake that I took just long enough to let him feel the steadiness in my grip. "Good to see you again, Ryan." "You too, man," he said, smiling too wide. The silence that followed was uncomfortable, at least for them. I looked around the office, the spotless awards on the wall, the glass windows that reflected every nervous twitch they made. I left after 10 minutes, but I knew I'd left something behind: unease. The following weekend was quiet. She avoided eye contact. Ryan didn't call as much. I could sense they were worried. And that's exactly what I wanted. Fear is slow, subtle, and contagious. Every night after she went to bed, I sat in my study, going through files. The emails, the photos, the timeline. Everything was ready. I was no longer hurt, no longer betrayed. I was preparing. The first crack showed on a Tuesday. Lily was sitting at the dining table, her laptop open, her face pale. She looked up at me when I walked in, forcing a smile that didn't land. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Yeah, just work stuff," she said too quickly. I could see the email reflected faintly in her glasses, the company's internal HR notice. Someone had reported unprofessional conduct between staff members. I didn't need to ask who. Mark had done his part. He'd sent an anonymous tip, backed with copies of their hotel receipts and timestamps. Nothing too explicit, just enough to raise suspicion. Corporate HR never ignored whispers about misconduct, especially involving management. For the next few days, she was restless, checking her phone constantly, snapping at me over nothing. Ryan stopped calling altogether. That told me everything. The noose was tightening. By Thursday, the company called an urgent review meeting. Lily claimed she'd be home late. I told her to take her time. When she left, I poured myself a drink and sat on the balcony, watching the city lights flicker like quiet witnesses. She came home close to midnight, eyes swollen. She didn't say a word, just dropped her bag and sat across from me. I let the silence do the heavy lifting. "They suspended him," she whispered finally. "Someone sent HR. Things. Photos. Emails. They think she stopped." I leaned back. "That must be tough," I said softly. "But if you didn't do anything wrong, it'll clear up, right?" Her eyes darted toward me, searching for something: guilt, anger, maybe relief. But I gave her nothing. That night she didn't sleep. She kept pacing around, whispering on the phone in the hallway. I caught fragments. "They can't know. It's not what it looks like. And please, just fix this." By morning, she was quiet, completely drained. I made breakfast like always, slid a cup of coffee her way, and said, "You'll get through it. You're stronger than you think." The words were gentle, but we both knew the undertone. She stared at me for a long moment, as if she finally realized something she should have seen months ago. I wasn't clueless. I never was. When she left for work, I opened my drawer, took out the envelope marked truth, and placed it in my briefcase. It was time to move to the next phase. Ryan wasn't just losing his job. He was about to lose his reputation, his marriage, and everything he thought made him untouchable. And Lily, she'd lose something worse: the illusion that I would always stand quietly in the background. I wasn't going to yell, or break things, or beg her to explain. I'd already said everything I needed to with my silence. But when I finally spoke again, the world would hear it. Friday came cold and gray, the kind of day when the city felt like it was holding its breath. I drove to work early, calm, steady, like any other morning. But this one wasn't routine. It was the day everything would finally unravel. In my briefcase sat the truth envelope. Inside were copies of everything: the messages, the timestamps, the hotel photos. But I'd added one more piece: a clean summary sheet, written so clearly that even a stranger could follow the story without needing context. Evidence is power, but presentation is control. Ryan's company was hosting a quarterly press briefing that day, the kind they used to parade their values and leadership. It was open to staff, partners, and even a few journalists, exactly the kind of audience he thrived on. I didn't plan to attend. I didn't need to. All I had to do was make sure the envelope reached the right inboxes before the event began. Mark handled that part. Within moments, dozens of emails went out from an anonymous sender, each containing a neatly formatted document titled Internal Conduct Review Material. By late morning, the storm had started. My phone buzzed nonstop, not from Lily, but from mutual friends, co-workers, even her cousin. Screenshots of messages spread through group chats. Is this real? Someone leaked this about Ryan. It's everywhere. I didn't reply to a single one. I simply turned my phone face down and continued working, calm as ever. By lunchtime, Ryan's company had gone into crisis mode. The meeting was canceled, his name scrubbed from their website within hours. HR released a carefully worded statement about serious breaches of professional ethics. They didn't mention him directly, but everyone knew who it was. Lily called me again and again that afternoon. I let the phone ring until her persistence finally forced me to answer. Her voice was trembling. What did you do? Me? I said quietly. I've been at work all day. They're saying, she stopped mid-sentence, like even speaking it out loud gave it more weight. Ryan's been suspended. They're investigating both of us. This could ruin everything. There was a long silence. I could hear her trying to hold back tears. Maybe it's karma, I said finally. You remember my birthday? When you both laughed. Maybe the world's just laughing back. She hung up. I sat there in silence. No satisfaction. No gloating. Just clarity. This wasn't revenge anymore. It was consequence. That evening, when I got home, the house was quiet. She was sitting at the kitchen table, still in her work clothes, eyes swollen, staring blankly at her phone. They're asking me to resign, she whispered. It's over. I poured myself a glass of water, took a slow sip, and nodded. Then I guess the truth finally did its job. For the first time in months, the air in the house felt lighter. And when she looked at me, I saw something I hadn't seen in a long time. Fear, yes, but also respect. The kind that only appears when someone realizes they've been laughing at the wrong person. By the next morning, the story had spread far beyond their office walls. You can't contain gossip once it's out in the open. The company's clients had started to ask questions. Investors wanted clarity. And just like that, Ryan, the man who had built his image on being reliable and disciplined, became the subject of whispered conversations and frozen smiles. I watched it unfold quietly. I didn't have to lift a finger. The truth was doing all the heavy lifting for me. Lily barely spoke. She moved through the house like a shadow, startled by every phone notification. I could tell she was waiting for me to lash out, but I never did. My silence unnerved her more than anger ever could. Every morning, she'd look at me as if expecting an explosion. Instead, she got calm politeness. A cup of coffee. A question about her plans for the day. But I wasn't done. There was one more step. I'd been invited to a charity gala that weekend, one Lily and I used to attend together every year. The same people who once admired us as a couple would be there. Mutual friends, her colleagues, even a few of her family members. She didn't plan to go this year, of course. I encouraged that. Take the weekend to rest, I said. You've had a hard week. She nodded, almost grateful. That Saturday evening, I put on my best suit and arrived alone. The whispers started as soon as I stepped into the room. People already knew about the scandal, but they didn't know I knew. That's what made the silence around me so thick. They didn't know how to act. Halfway through the night, during the dinner portion, one of Lily's friends leaned in and said softly, I'm so sorry about what happened. None of us expected. She stopped herself, unsure if she should continue. I smiled. Don't be sorry. You can't control other people's choices. That was the cue. I stood, tapped my glass gently with a fork, and waited for the room to quiet down. Before we continue, I began, I'd like to make a brief toast. Every head turned. I saw faces tighten, some curious, some uncomfortable. Many of you know me, and many of you have probably heard stories about me this week. I won't correct them. Stories tend to reveal more about the storytellers than their subjects. But I will say this. When people choose deceit over loyalty, they think they've found power. What they've actually found is a countdown. I raised my glass slightly. To truth, it always arrives, sometimes late, but never empty-handed. The room fell silent. A few people clapped softly, unsure whether it was appropriate. I smiled politely and sat down. No outbursts. No dramatics. Just precision. Later that night, I sent one final email, A clean summary of everything, sent to a small circle of our closest friends. No commentary, no emotion, just facts. By the next morning, Lily's phone was flooded with messages. Her friends, her family, everyone she'd ever tried to impress now knew exactly who she and Ryan really were. Her social circle, the one she'd valued more than her marriage, turned to dust in a single day. When I came downstairs, she was sitting on the couch, phone in hand, face pale and wet with tears. "How could you?" she whispered. "I didn't do anything," I said evenly. "I just stopped protecting you." She tried to speak, but couldn't. Her voice cracked, her shoulders shook, and I realized I didn't feel hate anymore. Only closure. That night, I packed my things. No shouting, no explanations, just a note left on the counter. "You mocked me in public." I answered in silence. "Now the silence is yours to live with." I closed the door gently behind me, and for the first time in years, the sound of peace followed me out. When I left that night, not the house, just the idea of walking away. The air outside felt sharp, but I came right back in. The house had been mine long before it was ours. It was where I learned to be patient, where I kept my plans in a locked drawer and my temper locked even tighter. I wasn't going to let a laugh and a half-truth turn the place into theirs. They expected spectacle. They expected me to vanish, to be the punchline in some private joke they could retell at dinner parties. They had the wrong script. I called my lawyer the next morning and kept the conversation brief and calm. I didn't want to fight. I wanted an outcome. The paperwork moved quietly, like the rest of my life had begun to move, with measured steps and no theatrics. Within a few days, there was a formal separation of accounts, an order placing temporary exclusive occupancy on the house in my name. It was a cold, bureaucratic thing, but it gave me what I needed: time and authority. I never raised my voice. I never stormed through rooms ripping curtains down. I sat in the living room while she paced the length of the house like someone performing an apology she didn't believe. She packed in fits and starts, grabbing what she thought defined her: the photos on the mantel, the designer bag she loved to show off, boxes of clothes she thought made her whole. I let her move through it. My presence did the rest. When she realized she wouldn't be coming back, the posture of the woman who once laughed in my face collapsed. Her calls were frantic. Her family called my phone, then my lawyer, then our mutual friends, some pleading, some indignant, some trying to broker deals as if dignity could be traded like a hire. I answered none of it. Each unanswered ring tightened the quiet around me into something that felt like a border. The day she left, she tried to make a scene. She stood on the porch, suitcase at her feet, and cried out a list of grievances that had the tone of someone reading the final act of a play they thought would turn to applause. I locked the front door and listened to her voice peel away into the street. A neighbor looked over the fence, eyes wide. I nodded once, polite and small, and then closed the curtains. Privacy does as much for a dignity as any spectacle could. She left with her things and a trail of reputation unraveling behind her. Her phone glowed constantly with messages she could not answer. Friends who once shared wine with her now offered short condolence texts and nothing more. Her professional contacts called to confirm the facts that had already been printed in their inboxes. The world she'd built, the gossip, the carefully curated image, frayed in public and in private. I stayed. I painted the spare room one neutral coat at a time. I moved furniture back into places that made sense to me. I kept her framed photo in a box on a high shelf for a week, then took it down and put it in the drawer with the other small things that belonged to a previous life. I made coffee in the morning and walked the dog in the evening. I slept in the bed we had picked together and did not flinch when the house echoed with the quiet of someone finally allowed to breathe. People asked, later, if I felt triumphant. The truth is quieter. I felt resolved. I had been humiliated in public. I had chosen calm. I had been betrayed in a space I thought was safe. I reclaimed it by simple, legal certainty and the steadiness of presence. Weeks turned into months. Her name dropped out of dinner conversations. Her new address circulated briefly in a whisper and then not at all. I received a few letters, some angry, some pleading, some legal, and I filed them, like old receipts, into the cabinet where I kept evidence and patience. In the end, I didn't need to hurt them to win. I didn't stage revenge. I stayed where I belonged and let truth, and the consequences it carried, do the rest. When people told the story afterward, They remembered the toast I'd made at my birthday, how I raised a glass and spoke of loyalty. They told it like a lesson now, not a punchline. The house stayed. The silence settled in, different this time. Not the vacant, hollow silence of a place emptied out, but the sure, clean silence of a room reclaimed. And when I walked through it, the sound that followed me was not applause or laughter. It was the steady, uncomplicated noise of a life put back in order. Dear listeners, our story has come to an end. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, leave a like, and share your thoughts in the comments.